You. I saw recently a couple of high-level players in NA post their tier lists for JoJo's ASBR, and it inspired me to make one of my own. I wanted to share some of my thoughts on the roster as it stands right now in patch 2.2. It's a big cast. This is a game with like 60 characters, and the player base is small enough that I don't think any tier list is definitive. I think you should take all of them with a grain of salt. But this is kind of how I'm looking at the roster right now, and while I don't want to spend too much time on any individual character, I do want to touch on some folks, especially characters that I feel are a little controversial or that I disagree with some other players on. So without further ado, I'll jump right in at B tier. For me, B tier, these are the characters that really struggle to win consistently at a high level. I think if you main these characters, you often have to outplay your opponents to win. It's not enough to be playing at their level. You have to be playing really, really. You have to be playing better than them, and that's hard to do. It's hard to count on. I just think there's too much holding these characters back. I'll touch on a couple of examples. Akira for me, like I have Akira close to the bottom of the roster. I have him here listed at the bottom. For example, I think like my issue with him is that while I think he's a pretty solid character when he has max. Outside of max, I'm just not a believer. I think he's a pretty mediocre character when he's not in max, and there's too much pressure on him to charge and get into max so he can be in his sort of good mode. Other characters need to set up to be at their best as well, but they pay you off a lot more on the other end. I don't know that I believe in Akira's payoff when he's in max, and he loses charge so fast. So that's where I'm at on the character. The other character I want to mention here is Narancha. I want to believe in Narancha. I want to hype this character up and say that he is much better. I don't have a lot of confidence in this placement because I think he needs to be explored way more. There haven't been enough people, sort of looking through his kit, posting what he can really do. I've seen a little bit of him, and so I'm using that to sort of inform this decision. But it's possible he's a lot better. Basically, the way I look at him, though, I think his projectile game and the zoning is solid. I think that's enough to do some work, but he seems pretty meter intensive on the other end, and I just don't know how you win like that. I just think you break his combos, and what does he really do at that point? Zone again? I don't know. I'm just not a believer. So that's kind of like my knock on these characters. That's B tier for me. I'll jump straight into A tier next. Gyro, I want to believe more in. I want to hype him up a little bit more. I do think that Gyro has really interesting tools with his like super block. He's got a horse, so of course he can do sort of the mounted shenanigans. And with a couple corpse parts, I think the character does get pretty scary. But it's really hard for me to be a huge believer in someone who I do feel needs to chase corpse parts a little bit. Without the corpse parts, I don't know, he feels kind of middling at best. Next character I want to talk about is Speedwagon. I've been playing a ton of Speedwagon. You can check out my set with Conan bricks on my channel. And I have basically the way I feel about Speedwagon is he's really high damage and his buttons are solid. Not like incredible, but his 5M I think is pretty tricky. The thing that sets Speedwagon up to be very good and what makes him feel at times really oppressive is the way that his sort of style specials can come out on even when he's getting hit. Basically, like you can punch Speedwagon, and if you already input like tattoo overhead, for example, that's something that I like to try a lot, you'll just win scrambles. I think he frauds out scrambles a lot more than other characters, and that's what kind of has his placement here for me, that combined with his high damage. You can definitely SG and just blow him up for it, so Speedwagon doesn't get to do it for free. I think he does need to take a lot of risks on his offense, but the fact that he wins so many exchanges keeps me a believer. I do like Speedwagon a lot, and I want to continue to play the character. I think he's very good. That's kind of like how I'm looking at A tier. I think A tier and up, by the way, I think all these characters are competitive. I think you can main any of these characters and do well with consistency in competitive environments. I believe in all of them. I'll jump into the next tier. A plus tier for me is the biggest. I think the power level in this game is fairly flat at this point. In terms of balancing, I think they've done a good job sort of reining in the best characters and strengthening the weakest characters for the most part. There's obviously a few folks who probably need more balancing. But A plus, I think that these characters have a little bit more juice than A. In terms of power level, I think they're comparable. like Polnareff, for example, I have at the top of A. Maybe he's even A plus. And I think in terms of power level, Polnareff is absolutely up there with these other characters. It was just I looked at his kit and I just didn't feel he had the consistency and the damage to make me believe in him. Damage isn't everything. That's not the only knock on him. I can sort of share more of what I doubt about Polnareff, but that's kind of how I'm feeling about the character. That's why he's not in this A plus tier. The first character in A plus tier proper I want to talk about is Trish. I've been somewhat of a believer in Trish for a while. I don't want to overemphasize it. I don't want to act like I think Trish is the best character in the game or anything like that, but I do think that her damage is definitely slept on in a lot of places. She hits really, really hard. Her buttons in user mode are actually pretty solid. I don't think that she has bad buttons necessarily. And while she's stubby and stand on, she hits very, very hard in that mode. So I think that if you can manage to deal with that stubby stand-on stuff that she has to endure, Trish can be a really, really good character. So I still am somewhat of a believer. I have her up here. I think that the damage combined with the invincible DP combined with her JH and some of her other tools, wall trap, I think it's enough to put her up here. Jumping ahead, I'll just mention Kira really quick to say that while I've played a ton of Kira, this is the character that is closest to a main for me, I would say, as I played ASBR. I don't have him as high as some other folks. I don't think he's S tier, mostly because I think he has to play a pretty fair game. Koinoki is real. That's what has him in A+, but and his damage, of course, is OD. Is one of the hardest hitting characters in the game. I just don't think that that's enough to put him in S tier. I think otherwise he has to do things like throw 236 on block, and he gets plus frames off of it, but sometimes he got SG'd, and it just leaves him in a tough spot. Bao, I wanted to mention really quickly just to say, while I like Bao, I can't put him too much higher. I used to have him in S. I used to think like Bao was even better than this. Some people have Bao as one of the weaker characters on the roster because he can be a little squishy and his damage is only average. I disagree with that. I think that he's got enough. I think we should be talking about him as a pretty high up tier character. I don't want to go too hard, but this is about where I see Bao right now because of his movement, because of his armor, because of his DP. I just think it's enough. Some people don't think that that's enough. I think that's enough to keep him up here. I think that you play Bao at a high level. I think you could definitely, if you're playing at the same level as your opponent, I just think Bao's really good. I'm a believer. I'm a Bao believer, so I'll keep him here. And then the other character in this tier, well, maybe two more. I wanted to talk real quick about Rohan, just to say we just saw SJRC host First to 10, and Drain Bamage played Rohan in that set against Range, who played Josuke 8. Range won pretty decisively, but I still very much believe in Rohan. I think that this character is hard to play really well, but when you play this character optimally, not just converting combos, which is only a portion of the game. It's really not about damage. Some people have downplayed this character because they say his damage isn't good enough. I think that that's making a mistake. It's hard for me to see it. I think his pressure is really scary. Silent JH is really scary. And the way he mixes in command grabs and stuff like that, he forces you to make reads. And I think characters like that, with the sort of DP and some of the other options he has, I think that's enough to keep him up here in A+. And just real quick, I'll say with Kakyoin, I wonder if I should move him up. Like, how different is he really from when he was arguably top 1? He's squishier, sure. But yeah, the squishier combined with the way they nerf JH, I feel like he's taken a step back and I'm putting him down here. But I might just be tripping. Maybe if Max Sev, for example, were to pick up this character and play again, I would be like, yeah, no, I was bugging. Kakyoin is great. But that's A+ tier for me. Again, I'd love to share thoughts about more characters, but I don't want to take too long on this. I'll jump right into S tier to round things out. I might get flamed for this one. I do still have Johnny in S tier. I understand that offline, people say that this character has been a lot worse. I haven't played against Johnny offline, so maybe I need to do that and stop talking. But I don't know. I look at his kit. I look at what he can do in user mode with his plus frames, the way he gets away with 4H. I look at on horse, the way he can shred guard bar, and I just still think the character, his DP, I think he has all the things that I look for from the best characters in the game, damage and all that. So I'm still comfortable keeping Johnny up here, but this is a character I feel like I might be very wrong about, and maybe it makes me look bad having him in S tier, but I'll keep it. I don't care. Yukako, I just want to say real quick, She might be the best grappler in the game. People have said that. Like, she goes into Love Deluxe and you have to hold her 5L pressure. What do you do? If you can tech her throw, shout out to you. But I just feel like you hold 5L and you feel like you're in a terrible position against this character. She hits hard and her pressure is really intense. And then I'll finish off by talking about what I believe are the three best characters in the game: Risotto, Jotaro, and Vanilla Ice. Some people have said Vanilla Ice is the absolute best. I don't hate that argument, but I kind of have this order because I think Vanilla Ice is really good, comparable to Jotaro in many ways in terms of the fact that like both of them feel very complete. It feels like they don't really have bad matchups. They can kind of do their thing against everyone. But one slight difference between the two is while I do think Jotaro has to do a little bit in terms of like rotating for wall, I don't think that's a huge knock. And he hits hard. I mean, we know what his kit does. Ice does have a little bit of the Hamon weakness. People have said like the Hamon weakness doesn't matter. Maybe I shouldn't say anything about that at all, but I don't know. I just feel like he's a little bit squishier. That's enough for me to give Jotaro the edge. But I do think the character's comparable, and maybe I'm just sleeping on how messed up Ice is. I do think this character's nuts. And then Risotto, I mean, he's been top tier, considered top tier for a long time. The separation for me, what keeps him the best in this game, is that while I think he is already a strong character just based on his kit, what separates him from these next two is that he presses the style button and he does so well against Whole Horse, against Mista, against Foof, against Kak, against Johnny. That it's just he has so many dominant matchups, so many good matchups that you don't feel like you need to outplay your opponent for. You can be a worse player than your opponent playing Risotto and still just sort of outgame them with your style button. I think that's enough to sort of separate him. It's not, I don't want to go too hard on people who play Risotto. I mained Risotto for a minute. But yeah, to me, like that's sort of that keeps him above even these other really juiced characters. I just think he has such good matchups against others in the top tier. And that's what keeps Risotto at the top of the roster. So that's kind of how I'm looking at the game right now. Thanks for watching. Thanks for checking this out. Let me know what you think in the comments. If you agree, disagree, if you have questions about someone I didn't talk about, let me know. But yeah, again, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.